It's my pleasure to talk to Mr. Neil O'Rourke, the Assistant Commissioner of the Canadian Coast Guard, who was participating this week in our third European Security SeminarNorth. So, Mr. O'Rourke, could you please describe us what your role is in the Canadian Coast Guard?
Sure. So as Assistant Commissioner, I'm the Assistant Commissioner specifically for the Arctic region. So within our country, we have 4 regions. The country is essentially divided up into 4, and the Assistant Commissioner is responsible for all operations, engagement, and management of staff and assets kind of in the given area. So that is my role. And in addition, I have a bit of a unique job in that we have recently, in the last year and a half, moved from a 3-region model to a 4-region model. So previously, the Arctic, in fact, fell under the responsibility of all 3 of my colleagues. And so it's not only my role to assume the normal duties of an assistant commissioner, but also to stand up the Arctic region, specifically working in partnership with our Indigenous peoples who live in the north.
So does this mean that the Arctic became more important, if I assume that you make it an extra region?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we're looking at the trends and whether it's in Canada, the importance of our government to reconcile with our Indigenous peoples, the changing climate, which is reducing, changing the ice conditions in the north, increases in vessel traffic, all signs, are pointing to the Arctic becoming more and more important. It's our responsibility to ensure the safety on the water, as well as protect the environment and make sure that oil doesn't get in the water and pollute the water. And so it just made sense instead of in a model where as much as my colleagues, of course, would as part of the responsibilities focus on the Arctic, they had many other things and concerns. And so the idea here was to be able to have one command that essentially always is thinking about the Arctic, and everything that I and my staff do is about servicing the Arctic in Canada.
That sounds very interesting, I must say. So what is your overall impression of the European Security SeminarNorth, so the 3rd version?
Yeah, well, very positive. So, I mean, this is the first time that I've come here, and I came on the suggestion of our commander of Joint Task Force North, who was here last year, and certainly it's been a great week. I often travel and speak at conferences, participate in various events, and what I can say here is that the quality of the individuals, it's obviously a much smaller event than some other Arctic fora that I go to, but the quality of the participants here is really top-notch, and having discussions with what I'll call international experts, either from the military domain, the public services, and from universities across the Arctic is very helpful in developing our own in advancing our own operations and advancing our services in the Canadian Arctic.
From all the discussions, we still, or sometimes we get the feeling, or there is a feeling, that the Arctic states seem somehow still hesitant in developing a more international approach to the problem solving, like, for example, the climate change, which obviously will influence the whole world, not only the Arctic. So what do you see as a role of international organizations in mitigating this?
Yeah, I think that collaboration and discussion around common issues is very important, and maybe I'll speak specifically to my world and the Coast Guard world. So as you are well aware, there's an Arctic Coast Guard Forum, and the 8 Arctic nations participate at that forum, and we have great discussions. And so I would say in the Coast Guard world, in fact, there's a lot of collaboration and a desire to increase our discussions on ensuring that the search and rescue and environmental response agreements that have been agreed to amongst our countries, that we are fully capable of standing up to those legal responsibilities. And the bottom line is that we all recognize that the Arctic is a very challenging operating environment, and that if there were an incident, we would likely need help from one or more of our neighbors. And so we're very focused on discussing how best to do that, how to ensure that 8 different countries with 8 different styles of Coast Guards with different mandates are in fact able to operate seamlessly. And we've done now 2 Arctic Coast Guard Forum live exercises, and certainly the main learning out of both of them thus far has been that we have to continue to focus on improving our communication and our interoperability.
Yeah, that is always seen as maybe the biggest problem in the Arctic, the communication. Yeah. So what? Besides that, what did you see as the most important topic of this week in the seminar? And did you get any new ideas from the discussions?
Yeah, I'm not sure I could pick a favorite. I think that having the broad array of discussions around security, so the fact that it's, there's a recognition that security, you can't draw a line between the hard security and the softer security issues, and actually kind of having a panel and getting into an in-depth discussion around each of those elements, I would say is the positive thing, as opposed to saying that I liked one more than the other. And I particularly like working in the smaller groups on the case study as well. I certainly will walk away with some learnings, and one of the key things for me is that I'm participating in the group that's looking at the Greenland as a case study. And while I do work with the Danish Defense Forces around Greenland, and Greenland is our next door neighbor, what's really sunk in is that there's huge commonality in the circumstances around Greenland and specifically around Nunavut in our eastern Arctic. And so there's a lot of great lessons that I'll pull from the case study specifically and the discussion with my colleagues that I think will be very applicable back home in Canada.
That's very interesting feedback for me as well, so that we see the commonalities. So is there any final comment you would like to make about the seminar?
No, I guess just I would reiterate the value. I get invited to participate in a lot of different events and fora, and of course have responsibilities back home as well. And so coming here was definitely value added. I will walk away having learned something, many things in fact, being able to bring practical ideas back to help me in my job back in Canada. And it's certainly something that I would welcome to participate again in future years.
Mr. Rourke, thank you very much for the conversation, but even more for joining us for this seminar, as I know the time is valuable for you and you have a lot of other duties. So thank you very much for attending the ESS seminar.
Well, thank you very much for putting it together and for the invitation to participate.